The first shot didn't come as a beam of light or a missile streaking across the stars. It came as silence. Every system on the Halcyon froze at once, screens locked, engines dead, the hum of the reactor vanishing as if someone had ripped the heart out of the ship. Everything just flatlined, Mara Linton said, her voice tight, fingers slamming uselessly across darkened keys. We're still alive, but we're not driving this thing anymore. Wesley Traynor felt the sweat gather at the back of his neck as he watched the stars slide across the viewport. They weren't drifting on their own. They were being pulled. Out of the dark, a shadow peeled itself free from the stars. The shape was too big, too deliberate, moving with the weight of intention. That's not debris, Wren whispered from sensors, her screen flickering to life only long enough to display a jagged outline before cutting back to black. That's a ship. No one spoke after that. The crew simply stared as the outline grew sharper, swallowing their little vessel in its shadow. It didn't look like anything built to explore or trade. It looked like something built to end things. The comms cracked alive with a voice that scraped against the ears, guttural and precise. Human vessel. You are trespassing in Council space. Your craft is seized. Prepare for boarding. For a heartbeat, the bridge stayed frozen. Mara's lips parted, but no sound came out. Wesley's jaw tightened, his mind racing through options that felt like none at all. Finally, he said quietly, "They're not asking. They're telling." The hull rang with a sound like chains hooking into steel. Grappling locks. They weren't bluffing. Mara turned to him, her face pale but steady. "What's the play?" Wesley met her eyes, and for the first time, his crew saw something in his expression that didn't look like protocol or procedure. It looked like a man already measuring the cost. "They want obedience," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried weight. "Let's give them a fight instead." The deck lights flickered as sparks sprayed from the aft corridor. The first breach alarm wailed. The ship was no longer theirs. And Wesley Traynor, standing in that suffocating silence, whispered the only words that felt right. "Let them come." The breech doors gave way with a howl of tearing metal. Smoke rolled across the corridor, and then the first of them stepped through. They weren't human, not even close. The figures towered in armored exosuits, their movements smooth and predatory, each step echoing with the weight of superiority. The crew of the Halcyon froze for a fraction of a second, confronted with the reality of the galaxy's first face-to-face contact. Wesley didn't freeze. He shouted, "Now!" Two engineers swung the plasma torches they had rigged into makeshift cutters. Blue-white arcs screamed through the air, blinding in their intensity. One alien lifted its arm in defense, but the torch melted straight through the armor's surface, slag spilling like molten wax. The thing staggered, not dead but shocked that prey dared bite back. Then the corridor dissolved into chaos. Mara ducked as a blast tore through the wall behind her, showering her hair with sparks. She slammed the wrench in her hand against the alien's helmet, again and again, teeth clenched, knuckles bleeding, until the visor cracked and something inside howled. She had never been a fighter. She had been a reporter. But in that moment, her body didn't care what she had been. Survival left no room for titles. Wren hurled a fire extinguisher, the heavy canister catching another alien square in the head. Wesley grabbed the younger technician, pulling him down behind cover before the retaliatory shot vaporized the air where his torso had been. "Stay low, keep moving," Wesley barked. The fight lasted less than 2 minutes. The humans should have been annihilated in seconds, but they fought like cornered wolves. They screamed, they bled, and they refused to yield. When the surviving aliens pulled back, dragging their wounded, the corridor was littered with debris, smoke, and the stubborn proof that humanity would not go quietly. For a moment, silence held. The crew, panting, bleeding, trembling, stared at one another with wide eyes. Mara leaned against the wall, chest heaving, hair plastered to her forehead. She laughed, but it sounded broken, breathless. "You realize," she said, "we just started a war." Wesley didn't argue. He just looked at the scorched doorframe, knowing more would come, knowing this wasn't victory. This was the opening shot. The news spread faster than light itself. The live transmission Mara had kept running beamed the entire boarding attempt back to Earth and out through every back channel of the galaxy. Billions of eyes watched grainy footage of humans fighting with wrenches and torches against soldiers bred for conquest. On Earth, fear quickly transformed into something sharper. Every news anchor, every commentator, every citizen in every crowded bar or living room knew the same thing. Humanity wasn't ready for this. But they weren't going to back down either. In the council chambers light years away, the laughter was loud at first. Delegates mocked the clumsy, savage resistance of the dirt world species. But the laughter faltered when an analyst replayed the footage frame by frame, pausing on a single moment. A human, blood streaking his face, grinning with a mouthful of red as he hurled himself at an armored giant twice his size. That smile unsettled them. The fleet came days later. It arrived in Earth orbit with the arrogance of inevitability, ships the size of floating cities blotting out the sun. Their commanders had been ordered not to annihilate but to punish. Show strength. Break the spirit before it ever learned how to rise. On the ground, humanity braced. Sirens wailed through cities. Families huddled in basements. Governments whispered about surrender while ordinary people whispered about fighting. Wesley, grounded with his surviving crew in London, found himself standing in front of a camera beside Mara. The air raid siren screamed outside as she adjusted the microphone with shaking hands. "You don't have to do this," he told her. She shot him a look. "Yes, I do. Someone has to speak, Wes. Someone has to remind them that we're not just numbers waiting to be crushed." The broadcast cut live to millions. Her voice, steady despite the tremor in her chest, carried across the airwaves and into homes across the planet. "They think we're small," she said, eyes burning into the lens. "They think a planet of farmers and mechanics and school teachers will bow to their power. But small doesn't mean weak. Small animals bite the hardest. And right now, it's our teeth they're going to feel." The first bombardments came minutes later. The aliens expected panic. They expected collapse. Instead, Earth became a maze of resistance. Cities went dark, power grids cut intentionally so orbital targeting struggled to lock on. Civilian boats turned into traps, fishing trawlers packed with explosives dragging alien craft into shallow harbors where they couldn't maneuver. Old Cold War satellites, forgotten in orbit for decades, were reprogrammed into crude kinetic weapons, slamming chunks of metal into billion-credit ships. Dylan Kessler, a young engineer in Boston who had lost his parents in the first strike, worked around the clock in an abandoned subway tunnel. He and a handful of others stripped alien wreckage, jury-rigging weapons out of scraps. None of it should have worked. Too crude, too unstable. But when a prototype cannon fired a beam that punched through the side of an enemy corvette, Dylan didn't care if the thing melted down in the process. Humanity needed victories, however small. Mara's broadcasts became the heartbeat of the resistance. She spoke from bombed-out shelters, from rooftops where smoke choked the sky, from hidden basements where she read letters sent in by civilians who refused to yield. Her words weren't polished, weren't rehearsed. They were raw. "They can burn our cities. They can tear holes in our skies. But they'll never own us. Not now. Not ever." The punitive strike ended after weeks of brutal fighting. The aliens, who had expected an easy demonstration, withdrew bloodied and furious. Their ships limped out of orbit, leaving behind craters where cities once stood, but also something more dangerous than rubble. A planet still standing. A species still unbroken. On the bridge of the retreating flagship, the alien commander slammed his clawed fist against the armrest, voice low and venomous. "If they fight this hard with nothing, what happens when they learn?" The fire still smoldered when Dylan Kessler crawled out from under the rubble. Boston was gone, not destroyed in the cinematic way movies once imagined, but gutted and half-silenced, streets carved into trenches, glass crunching underfoot where skyscrapers had been peeled open like tin cans. His ears rang from the bombardment, and the acrid smoke made every breath cut like broken glass. He wasn't thinking about victory. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about the twisted, half-intact alien core sparking at the end of the crater. He staggered toward it, ignoring the heat and the sting of his burned palms as he pried the metal casing loose. Inside, the machine still hummed faintly, wounded but alive. He crouched over it with a kind of reverence. "This is it," he whispered, voice hoarse. "We can use this. We have to." By nightfall, Dylan had pulled together a circle of survivors. Old electricians, a physics professor missing 3 fingers, 2 teenagers who knew how to solder because they used to build drones for fun. Together, in a forgotten subway tunnel beneath the wreckage, they began working by generator light. There were no manuals, no proper tools, no guarantee the thing wouldn't blow their heads off. But Dylan refused to stop. Every stripped wire and jury-rigged connection was another middle finger raised against extinction. On the other side of the galaxy, in the vaulted chambers of the council, the mood was not triumph. Delegates floated in their suspension pods, their voices echoing across marble walls veined with bioluminescence. What had begun as smug certainty was unraveling into bitter argument. "They are primitives," hissed the envoy from the Thalnari, his skin glittering like scales under the light. "Primitives that cost us 37 ships. This is shameful." "And whose fault is that?" snarled a representative from the cartel, her mandibles clicking. You assured us they would kneel. Instead, they bite and claw like vermin. Across the chamber, another voice cut through the noise. Old, weary but sharper than any blade. You all speak of vermin, said Counselor Aaron of the Cesari. But I have studied the transmissions they broadcast. These humans do not see themselves as vermin. They see themselves as wolves. And when wolves are cornered, they do not cower. They kill. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Few wanted to admit it aloud, but the evidence was undeniable. Footage from Earth played in the chamber, projected on towering holoscreens. A grainy clip showed civilians hauling an injured alien soldier into a bomb shelter, binding his wounds with their own shredded clothes even as bombardments raged outside. Another clip showed a child standing in front of a tank, clutching a kitchen knife, eyes burning with defiance. And then there was the one that silenced even the loudest voices. A human soldier, drenched in blood, laughing as he dragged himself across shattered concrete to pull a grenade pin at point-blank range. That laughter unsettled them most of all. Back on Earth, Mara Linton sat cross-legged in the corner of a bombed-out shelter, a lantern casting her face into flickering shadows. Her camera was rigged to a half-functional uplink, but it was enough. She read aloud a letter sent to her broadcast channel by a mother in Warsaw. My daughter asks me if the stars are angry. I tell her no. I tell her the stars are watching us. And if they're watching, we'd better show them what it means to be human. Mara paused, swallowing hard before lifting her eyes to the lens. Her voice softened but carried steel beneath. The galaxy thinks it can frighten us into silence. But the truth is we've been here before. Every war, every disaster, every tyrant who thought they could bury us, humanity has always clawed its way out of the grave. If you're listening to this, if you're still breathing, then you already know. We don't stop. Not until the last light goes out. She ended the transmission and leaned back against the wall, eyes closed. She felt hollow, wrung out. She wasn't sure she believed her own words anymore. But it didn't matter. People needed to hear them, and so she would keep speaking until she couldn't. Wesley found her there, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. He lowered himself beside her, silent for a long time before muttering, "You're the reason half this planet hasn't collapsed yet." Mara gave a tired laugh. "You make it sound like a compliment. It feels more like a curse." "Maybe," Wesley said. "But it's keeping us alive." In the council chamber, the debates grew uglier. One faction demanded Earth's total annihilation. "This is a disease," the Thalnari envoy spat. "If they spread, if they inspire others, the order of the galaxy will unravel." Another faction urged caution. "Extermination will cost us dearly," Counselor Aaron warned. "You cannot frighten a species that thrives on hardship. You cannot break a people who laugh as they bleed. If we continue to provoke them, they will learn. And once they learn, they will become something we cannot control." The chamber erupted into shouts, translations layering over one another in a storm of voices. The council was fracturing. In the tunnels beneath Boston, Dylan Kessler crouched beside the humming alien core. His hands were blistered, his nails torn, his eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights. He tightened the last improvised clamp, whispered a shaky prayer and flipped the switch. For a breathless second, nothing happened. Then the prototype roared to life, spitting arcs of unstable energy down the length of a steel pipe they had converted into a cannon. The blast punched a hole through the collapsed subway wall, leaving the stone glowing red-hot. The tunnel filled with shouts, laughter, disbelief. Dylan sank to the ground, exhausted and trembling, but smiling for the first time in weeks. "It works," he murmured. "God help us, it actually works." That same night, Mara received a coded transmission. The signal was faint, scrambled, and not human. She almost deleted it as interference, until the words came through. Only 2 words. Spoken in an alien tongue, translated by her battered uplink. "They're afraid." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She played it again and again until the truth of it sank in. Someone, somewhere inside the very council that had tried to burn Earth, was warning them. The council chambers were quieter than usual, as if every word spoken had weight enough to crush the air. The great hall, carved from stone older than most stars, pulsed with faint light from embedded veins of crystal. Delegates hung in their pods, each one projecting the solemnity of authority, but under it was something rawer, fear. "We cannot allow them to exist unchecked," said the Thalnari envoy, his scaled skin rippling with agitation. "Every day they endure, their myth grows. Other species are watching. Already there are whispers of resistance movements calling themselves human sympathizers. This cannot stand." A chorus of approval echoed from the hawks among them. Counselor Aaron, his long frame draped in ceremonial silk, raised a hand for silence. His voice was calm, but it carried. And yet you all saw the same footage I did. Entire cities reduced to ash, yet still they fought. They are not like us. They do not yield to overwhelming force. If we attempt eradication, we may succeed, yes. But what if we fail? What if, in failing, we forge the very monster we fear? His warning lingered in the air, but it did not sway enough of them. The vote was called. By slim margin, the council decreed the unthinkable. Earth was to be erased, humanity reduced to memory before it could ever rise beyond its cradle. And so the fleets began to gather. On Earth, the sky had never looked so ominous. Telescopes and military radars tracked the coalition armada's slow convergence, a storm of steel and fire threading its way across the stars. There was no pretense this time, no talk of punishment. This was execution. Wesley Traynor stood on the balcony of what had once been the United Nations building in New York. The city below was broken, a skeleton of its old self, yet still alive with people preparing defenses that none of them believed would work. He watched the flood of civilians hauling crates, wiring explosives into bridges, fortifying subway stations. Ordinary men and women who had no uniforms, no training, but had decided they would not leave Earth quietly. Mara found him there. Her face was pale, sleepless, but her eyes had not dimmed. They're coming in force, Wes. You've seen the numbers. We can't match them. Not in ships. Not in firepower. I know, he said softly. He didn't turn from the skyline. So what do we tell people? She pressed. Her voice wasn't angry. It was pleading. Do we tell them to hope or do we tell them to fight? He finally looked at her. We tell them the truth. And the truth is, fighting is all we've got left. Far beneath Boston, Dylan Kessler slammed his fist against the prototype as sparks spat across the tunnel. Come on, you piece of junk, hold together, he muttered, wiping sweat and grime from his brow. The cannon hummed ominously, energy building in unstable rhythms. His ragtag team circled it, wide-eyed but unwilling to step back. They had managed to build 4 weapons from salvaged alien cores, each one dangerous enough to kill its own crew if handled wrong. Dylan stared at the glowing machine, every nerve in his body screaming exhaustion, but his mind clung to a single thought: better to burn out trying than to die begging. He checked the wiring one last time, then straightened. Loaded on the truck. If they want to finish us, then we're going to make sure they bleed for every inch. When the armada arrived, the sky became fire. The first wave of orbital strikes hammered into the oceans, sending tidal waves crashing across coastlines. Megacities burned. Mountain ranges split. The Earth shuddered under the weight of weapons not meant for planets, but for extermination. And still humanity fought back. Fighter jets, obsolete by galactic standards, screamed into the skies. Their missiles found little purchase, but every kill became a beacon of defiance. Civilian militias dragged railguns onto rooftops, firing until they melted into slag. Dylan's prototypes were rolled into place on battered trucks, belching unstable beams that tore through alien corvettes like hot knives through glass. On one rooftop in London, Mara broadcast through a makeshift uplink. The world around her was nothing but smoke and ash, but her voice was steady, carrying across what remained of the networks. You're not alone, she said as explosions thundered behind her. Every street, every city, every home that still stands as part of this fight. They want to erase us, make us ghosts. But ghosts don't fight. And look around you. We are still fighting. Her words carried beyond Earth, intercepted by sympathizers across alien networks. Hidden groups who had long hated the Council watched with burning eyes. Humanity's struggle was no longer just humanity's. It was a spark waiting to ignite something bigger. The battle reached its crescendo when the Coalition flagship descended into low orbit. A leviathan of metal, bristling with weapons, its shadow covered entire regions of the Earth. The order was given to begin the final bombardment. But the order never finished. Mutinies erupted across sections of the fleet. Alien crews, unwilling to participate in genocide, sabotaged weapons, disabled targeting arrays, or outright turned their guns against their own. The Coalition fractured in real time. In that chaos, Dylan's last-ditch weapon was hauled onto a ridgeline outside the ruins of Boston. Its power core screamed, the air shimmering as the cannon overloaded. Dylan climbed onto the rig, his face lit by the white-blue glow, and shouted to the terrified men and women around him. Hold it steady. Just one shot, that's all we need. The beam erupted. It tore across the sky, slicing through layers of atmosphere before slamming into the flagship's armored hull. For a moment nothing happened. Then the behemoth cracked, a bloom of fire splitting it apart from within. The detonation lit the clouds, and for the first time that day, the sky brightened not with destruction, but with the possibility of survival. The battlefield fell silent. What remained of the coalition armada scattered, retreating in disarray. On the ground, people staggered from shelters and craters, staring upward with hollow eyes. They hadn't won. Not really. Cities were ash, families gone, earth carved into ruin. But they were alive. Humanity still stood. Wesley knelt on broken concrete, his body shaking, his voice hoarse as he muttered to no one in particular, "God help us, we're still here." Above him, the wreckage of the flagship burned, its pieces falling like dying stars across the night. The fires burned for 3 days before the skies finally cleared. Cities along the eastern seaboard were nothing but skeletons of glass and steel, their streets clogged with ash and silence. The fleets that had come from orbit were gone, their wreckage littering the oceans like oil-slicked tombstones. Earth had survived, though survival looked nothing like victory. Wesley Traynor stood with the other survivors on what used to be the outskirts of Boston. The hills were blackened, the forests gone. Makeshift camps spread across the rubble, tents of scavenged fabric and bent metal. People moved through the ruins with the slow, careful steps of those who had seen too much, voices kept low as if afraid to disturb something that might still be listening. Mara Linton had taken command of what was left of their unit. Her uniform was scorched, the insignia torn away, but people still looked to her when the arguments rose about food, water, or shelter. She listened, spoke little, and carried a weight in her eyes that words could not lighten. Dylan Kessler, the one who always had a joke ready before, had grown quiet. He busied himself with repairs, building crude filters for water or shoring up tents against the cold, but he rarely spoke above a murmur. At night, the survivors gathered around broken fires and whispered about what they had seen. Some swore the alien ships had fled in panic, others that they had been forced back by sheer chance. No one agreed on how the final hours had unfolded. All they knew was that the enemy was gone and Earth was still turning. But victory felt fragile, like ice beneath their feet. Wesley felt it first. While walking the ruins one night, he stopped on a ridge where Boston's skyline used to stand proud. Beyond the smoke and shattered buildings, he saw a faint glow on the horizon. It wasn't fire. It wasn't the orange flicker of human destruction. This light pulsed, steady and deliberate, as if answering a signal from somewhere deep underground. He didn't tell anyone that night. He told himself it was exhaustion, or the flicker of embers caught in the fog. But the next day he felt the tremor underfoot. Only a breath, a quiver in the earth, but enough to send a loose rock sliding down the slope. By the second night, others noticed too. Mara stood beside him on the ridge, her arms folded tight across her chest. She watched the horizon in silence for a long time before finally asking, "Do you think they'll come back?" "Yes," Wesley said. His voice was flat, his eyes never leaving the faint, unnatural light in the distance. "But that's not what worries me." Mara turned to him. "Then what does?" He didn't answer right away. He was listening. The air itself carried something faint, something too low for most to notice. A hum buried deep in the ground. It was steady, slow, and living like a heartbeat pulsing through the bones of the earth. At the camps below, the survivors were laughing quietly around the fires, clinging to the fragile illusion that they had won. Children chased each other between tents, their voices raw but alive. Dylan was working on a broken radio, coaxing sparks into life with a stubborn determination. No one else seemed to hear it yet. But Wesley knew. His hand tightened on the strap of his rifle, though the weapon felt useless now. He turned back to Mara, and the words finally came, quiet as a confession. "I think they left something behind." Mara's expression shifted, her bravado faltering as the glow pulsed again on the horizon. She looked at him as if hoping he was wrong, but the silence between them carried the weight of truth. The hum beneath their feet deepened, just enough that the fires in the camp flickered in rhythm, like candles bowing to a presence they could not see. Far above, the stars were cold and distant. Somewhere in that endless dark, the Galactic Council was already meeting, their voices rising in fear as they wrote Earth's name into law. Never provoke them again. Yet here on the ground, Wesley felt the truth pressing against his chest with every pulse of the hidden heartbeat. Humanity had survived the invaders, but the invaders had not left empty-handed. Something had been buried, something meant to wait. The last stone rattled loose from the ridge and tumbled into the silence below. Wesley closed his eyes, and for the first time since the war began, he wondered if survival had been the worst outcome of all.